Good afternoon, Heathen Brewer here, and welcome to another one of my videos. Today's video is a bit of a different one. It's not a beer tasting or beer brewing, it's more equipment modification, come sort of progression, I suppose, or sort of trying to get a better brew out of the equipment I've got. Normally what I tend to do is I sort of boil a sort of pseudo 3-tier system, only without a third pot. So what I do is I drain the water off into a separate pot from the mash tun, and then I reintroduce it back to the boiler and then boil it, add the hops, blah blah blah. But I recently went back to doing a bit more brew in a bag, just because I've not done it for a very long time, probably a good couple of years now, and I just wanted to see if I could just get a better efficiency with what I was getting before, and it sort of has worked. I was getting mid to low 60s as a percentage efficiency. Now with the brew in a bag, we're doing a dunk sparge, 2 dunk sparges, split the sparge water in half, heat it to sparge temperature, and then I do 2 dunks basically of the bag, give it a good stir, leave it in the water for a while, and then drain it off. And it seems to work. I'm getting an efficiency probably somewhere mid 70s, 75, 76. But I see people using recirculation pumps to try and glean a clearer wort, which is ideally what I'm doing this for. I want to try and leave as much of the crud and the crap behind, and actually go for a try and get a cleaner looking, brighter looking wort. So when it boils, you don't get all that protein and hot, hot break. That's the stuff. Yeah. So without further ado, I will show you what I'm going to do. It's going to involve one solar pump. There's not going to be any complicated cam fittings. It's just going to use the push fittings I've got on the tap on the kettle, going into the 1/2-inch fitting on the pump via a silicone tube, and then the silicone tube going from the pump up to the fittings in the lid, and then through what I used to use as a sparge manifold. No, it wasn't a sparge manifold actually, it was a filtering manifold for the kettle, which is going to be modified and broken down and refitted to suit. So without further ado, I will show you what I'm going to do. Right, well, the first modification will be to the filter at the bottom of the kettle. Before I used to use it, in fact that used to go into the mash tun, and I used to have a side like a pickup pipe that used to come off the side of the kettle. That's no longer going to be the case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that to sit in the bottom of the kettle. Tank fitting is going to go through the hole from there, from the underside, so it's going to go that way in. And the good thing with these tank fittings is, if I can get it in focus, is that they've got like 2 little, I don't know what you call those, sort of raised areas on the bottom, which means that when it sits in the kettle, it will actually be off the bottom of the kettle floor, so it will actually be able to drain through it, so you won't get it sucking itself to the floor. Yeah, so I'll get that assembled. It's going to need a small amount of soldering, so that pipe's got to go into the top of there, like so, and then it'll come out the top like that, and it'll go into the tap in the boil kettle. So you'll see this next when I've done that, and it will be all together and hopefully fitting well. Right, well that's the filter for the bottom of the kettle. So you can see it will sit like that in the kettle with those 2 little sort of thingies. stopping it from touching the bottom of the kettle. I'm not sure whether it's the best way of doing it, drawing up from the centre of the kettle where the element is, but it's all trial and error. I'm sure I'll change it and mess about and do other stuff with it. But that's basically ready for fitment, so I'll just give it a quick try and we'll see how it looks. Please excuse the condition of the inside of the pot. It needs a good clean, but this is just for sort of testing and what have you. As you can see, it's going to draw up from the bottom, from the centre of the kettle, and then go out through the tap. So it's just one hard, rigid pipe. It stops the bag from scorching on the bottom, obviously because of the mesh filter, and it also filters anything that's coming through, so if you get any stray grains it'll probably do that, but it's drawing at its lowest point too, which is ideal. But we'll wait and see. This is all trial and error. I don't know whether it's going to work, but you know, in for a penny, in for a pound. Right, the next step is to remove that T-piece on the end, and this pipe here, as you can probably see, it's got a slight bend in it, which is for when it needed to find its way out of the mash tun, or the boil kettle I think this was for. So we're going to replace that pipe there with a straight piece of pipe of the adequate length, which I think is going to be that. So that will go in there instead of that bent piece of pipe. Sorry about my camera work, it's terrible, I know. So which will give me the correct height. So this will be used as the recirculation manifold. So this will sit in the lid of the Berco. It'll come via one of those, which is a tank fitting, and it'll just be fitted with some soft washers, and then on the other end it'll have some 15mm copper pipe connected through some compression fittings. And well, just to show you on the other side of this manifold, it's that. So that will be used as the recirculation for the mash, as I said, and the sparge, for all the sparging and the mash to go through. So we're just going to modify that. Just a little side note worth noting before we assemble the manifold, so you can see it in its sort of completeness. Just to let you know that when this was built, it was built into two sections so that it could be taken apart and cleaned, so you get any grain out. If you got stuck with anything or you needed a good clean, a good wash, it could just be split apart pretty much like that and give it a good clean. So we're going to assemble it. I'll give it all a bit of a rub up with some iron wool and see what we got. Right, this is the manifold. That's the new pipe I've put in. Just fold it down a little bit so you can get an idea what I've done. This is probably how it will sit in the lid. You imagine this the worktop being the grain bed. It'll just sit like that. And there's another tank fitting here, which I've had to open up because it was a bit too tight for the 15mm thing. So that'll go on there like that. Go up through the lid of the kettle, the Berco, and then it'll come back out of that. Right, well this is the manifold done. What you see here is the back of the lid of the urn, and that is what it's going to look like when it goes on. It's probably what, 3 inches deep off the bottom of the lid. That's with the tank fitting. That's the top of the tank fitting there. So there'll be a 15mm pipe going in there, something like that, with a compression fitting on it, and then that sort of will go on like that and then come out and then down the side of the pot. Right folks, this is the last bit of the lid really. That's the manifold in place. Not the manifold, but the arm that comes up off the side of the kettle, which fit from the pump. So this next pipe that'll go on there will go be a short stubby pipe just below the level of the lid, and that'll have a silicone pipe connected to it from the pump. So that is it as far as the lid goes. It's not a bad little number. I hope it seems fairly substantial. I have to obviously insulate it at some point as well, but we'll see how that goes. What have I got to do next? I suppose it's a case of putting this pipe on the end of there. And then what we'll do is we'll see how. Might have to have a look, see how it works, so we can get it to run. That's it, sort of in its entirety, to be honest with you. So the bit of silicone pipe. I've got a little tap arrangement on the side there, so I can adjust the flow if I need to. Probably will. A little pump. I think I paid something about 12 quid for that, all in. And another length of silicone pipe, just making that connection to that pump. Pump going straight up to the manifold there, straight across, down into the lid, and from the lid, just hold on a sec, let's just unclip the lid a minute, to the manifold below. All seems to be working really well, to be honest with you, a bit too well, if I'm honest. Fairly effortless, and to be honest with you, it's, apart from a little bit of soldering and a bit of thought, doesn't take an awful lot. I might straighten these pipes up a bit, although to be honest with you, it doesn't really warrant it. Just going to make things worse for myself, I think. So, all in, that is it, all bar the bag. I haven't mentioned also the fact that I've reinforced the insulation on here. I've doubled up the insulation and I've put some black gaffer tape around the outside just to keep it all tight and all in sort of good order. I'm really stoked. I'm really pleased with that. As I say, I'll probably make a little rig up for this, where I've got the pot on a stand, so it raises the bottom up off the floor, because the problem with these Burkos, unlike the Buffaloes, they don't have any feet on the bottom, so the base of it sits directly on the worktop. Of course, the problem with that is you get a build-up of heat, and then they have a tendency of cutting out. So what I tend to do when I'm boiling is I'll probably pull that forward to the edge of the worktop, just to let the element breathe underneath. But what I'll do is I'll make a rig, and then what I'll do is I'll put that on the rig, have a little outrigger coming off the side, and just screw that down onto it, and then that'll be it. It'll be perfect. Absolutely perfect. As far as cleaning is concerned, it's just a case of undoing them, doing the joins, a couple of joins on there, and then just cleaning them through. I mean, just clean that through with some cleaner. Actually, just get it all done, sorted all out, and then just pass some cleaner through it and clean it that way, which would be spot on. So, first brew day. I've got a brew on tomorrow, but I'm not going to do it using this. I don't want to ruin the kit. I've been given a kit to demonstrate, so I'll probably just do a brew in a bag tomorrow. But that is entirety, folks. What's that? An hour and a half's worth of work, if that. Hours worth of work, and a bit of time and patience when we're thinking of it. So thanks a lot, folks. That's about it. Welcome back since the end of the video. As far as it goes, I mean, that was as straightforward as it gets. I mean, I didn't do anything I hadn't done before. There's no particular skills involved. If you can solder, you don't even have to solder. You could just use compression fittings. For the most part, I just like soldering that up because it makes it look a bit neater, a bit more permanent. Buy yourself a pump, cheap pump, as long as it's heat graded and food graded, and make a little sort of pickup on the bottom of the kettle, just to protect the, just to draw it out. And also, I mean, I did a 2-in-1 with that really, and so that you've got a way of picking it up off the bottom of the kettle, and also you've got a way of stopping the bag from getting scalded or scorched off the element. And that is it. Easy peasy. Say, doubled up the insulation on it to make it more brew in a bag friendly. And I'm going to make something for the lid in a minute as well. Just something that some of the offcuts I've got, so I can just put something over the top. But yes, so thanks again. It's a very hit and miss video. It's been probably very poorly videoed, but I hope this just gives you an idea of what I've had to do and what I've done. and see if it works. So in a couple of weeks maybe, or next weekend, I'll do a little brew with it and we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much.